Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Iceland Central Lisbon Museum. We're delighted today to invite Dr. Patrick McKay from the Ulster Place-Name Society, who is going to give a talk this afternoon as part of Lisburn and Castlereagh City Council's Irish Language Week. I was thinking about how I would introduce Dr. McKay, and I was thinking I was born and bred in Drumbo, and I think the Irish name for that is the Long Ridge of the Cow. And there are some wonderful place names of the townlands, the likes of Ballycurgannon, Ballyochlis, the Maelach, etc. And somebody must have stopped at all the good names when it came to naming the streets, because we have the front road and the back road. And could we go back and the bog road? So, without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Dr. McKay. Thank you, Dr. McKay, for joining us today.
Thanks very much, Paul. I was just chatting to Paul for a minute there, and he said Drumbo, and I said, well, I may have that on my PowerPoint. Would you believe that? That's a real coincidence. It's not a big coincidence, because the approach here is I'm going to show you the main elements in Irish place names, and I'll show you. For each one, I'll show you a map of Ireland, and this will show you where all these elements are found throughout the whole island of Ireland. I'm going to start that with a caveat, because the simple truth is that all the place names in Ireland have not been researched, especially in Northern Ireland. In Dublin, they have a professional place names branch, and it is a legal requirement. The law, the other side of the border, Irish is the first official language, right? It's the first, so they have no choice but to provide an Irish language version of every single place name on the other side of the border, which means they're way ahead of us as far as interpretations. And one of the websites I'm going to illustrate is the Dublin place name branch, which has, as you can understand, hasn't got as much in the north as they have the other side of the border, but it's still, they have quite a bit on this side of the border as well. But the caveat I was going to say, these maps I'm going to show you, not all the place names in Ireland are researched, so they can only be an approximation. Nobody has got around to establish an authoritative Irish form for each and every townland name in Ireland, or each and every place name in Ireland. So this guy, a guy called Patrick O'Connor, has done these maps, and they're not complete. The Dublin branch are working on much more complete versions, but you'll get very few in the north distribution maps. Anyway, okay, so having said that, let's go. There are 62,205 townlands in Ireland. Of these, it's estimated that roughly 85% have their origin in the Irish language. The remaining 15% are mainly of English origin, though we do have a small number of Norse place names. We have Strangford, Carlingford in the north, and we have Wicklow and Wexford and Waterford. Those are Norse names. And in the north of Ireland, we have a small number of Ulster Scots townland names, and not an awful lot, but a small number of Ulster Scots townland names. And we have a very substantial number of Ulster Scots minor place names with Bray and Now names. I can't think of so many of them just off the top of my head. Moss, yeah. There are quite a lot of minor place names of Ulster Scots origin in the north of Ireland. However, for the purpose of this talk, I will confine myself to townland names which have their origin in Irish, and this represents the great majority of our townland names. Okay, so having said that, so I've analysed the different elements that make up our place names. The first group, the first category is called settlement names. settlement names, and they're secular settlement. In other words, they're not church settlements. They're just ordinary like villages and towns and townlands. So I'm looking at three main elements that are found in settlement names, and these are Bala, which means a townland. It has a range of meaning. Bala has a wide range of meaning. I've only put three of them up. The usual meaning, and it's anglicised as Bally. So that's not rocket science. I'm sure any one of you could say, oh, I know an awful lot of Ballys, and I'm sure you do, because it's extremely common. But it can mean a townland, it can mean a farmstead, or it can even mean a town, as in the case of Ballymoney, Ballymena, and Ballyclare. Ballyclare is actually a Ballach one, which means it's not Ballyclare, but it can mean a town as well as a small settlement or a townland. So just for convenience sake, we're just going to define it as townland, because that's its usual meaning as a townland. Okay. Then the next one, we have three words that mean fort. So that's a type of settlement as well. The ancient ring fort, that was a settlement. It was a farmstead. Usually that's where the farmer lived with his family and his buildings around it. So we have three different words that mean fort. One of them is Doon, and then we have, it's pronounced Ra, just Ra in Irish, but it's Wrath. It's anglicised as Wrath. You all know what a wrath is. Anyway. You don't need me at all to tell you. And the next one is Liss. And you can think of so many, even this town here we're standing in. Lisburn. The burn is a mystery to me. If anybody can tell me the burn, it's really Lisnaskea. The name of it was always Lisnaskea until the town grew up. Lisnaskea, the fort of the gamesters. But then it was changed to Lisburn. Somebody said it was because the town was burned down way back in 1600, I think. It doesn't sound all that convincing to me. But anyway, I better move on here because I don't want to go on too long. So we're going to just, and you'll forgive me for getting through these because I've got quite a lot of slides. So I just want to give you an impression, right, of where all these elements that make up our place names are. So you'll forgive me, I'm going to have to move pretty fast, okay? Bally, you'll see it's not evenly distributed at all. You can see it's very numerous all around here. Valleys, oh, look at all the valleys around Dublin and on down from Dublin and into Wexford and into what? Look at it. But over here, hardly any. You know, it's quite remarkable. And here in Longford, hardly any. Look at the Ards Peninsula. It's absolutely full of valleys. Now, why? And here, this is Lough, just facing, you know, where Strangford, just facing the Ards. Why is that? Nobody has given any satisfactory explanation. The suggestion is it's to do with the Normans. When the Normans came down, they adopted the Irish townland as a unit of land, a land unit, and they put the word town. They call it, so they used maybe a Norman surname and put town, and then once the Normans, once their great power subsided, there was a Gaelic revival again after that, and what was town was Gaelicised as Bally. So that is the suggestion that's why that would figure as, you know, geographically where the Normans were strongest. Yes, and down here, no, and up here, you look at Mayo. You'd be hard pressed and even Donegal, and then hardly any in Tyrone, and hardly any in Cavan, and Fermanagh has only got. You see for Lough Neagh there, you see that? There's hardly any valleys there. It's an interesting distribution. Somebody needs to sit down and write a thesis I did my thesis on my own area, which is just at the top of Lough Neagh, outside Randalstown, the Baronies of Toome. But anyway, there's this tremendous scope for. It shows you how much research is still to be done on place name. But anyway, so there's your valleys. Anyway, well, I better keep going on now. So just examples when Ballymena and the middle town, it's town land. It's nothing to do with the middle of it. Some people think it's because it's in the middle of County Antrim. That's not at all, because the name Ballymena was there ages before the town and before the county was set up, and it means the middle town land. So it must have been middle in relation to two other things, I would say, but definitely not because it's the middle town land. The middle town in Antrim, Ballynahinch, the townland of the river home, Ballygolly in Tyrone. There are a few in Tyrone. Ballygolly is one of them. Ballyaghalurcher, O'Daly's townland. And Ballinacor in Armagh. There's not many valleys in Armagh either. Can you think of any valleys in Armagh? I can only think of one or two, and that's one of them. Ballinacor, the townland of the Weir, or causeway. And then we'll have Ballymagorty. There's plenty in there. Good in Derry, London, there. McGroarty's townland. Let's move on a bit. So Ballycassidy, Ballantrae. There's one of the Donegal ones, one of the few, is the townland of the river home. And then Ballyjamesduff, which we all know the famous Percy French song. Come back, Paddy Ryle. I'm not going to sing, I'll spare you that. Anyway, and then it's James Duff's townland. And then we have Ballingarry and Monaghan, the townland of the garden. Garry means a garden, right? And you do get Bally at the end. That would catch you out, wouldn't it, very easily? Because you never would think, oh, there's Corbally, the odd townland, or odd or conspicuous townland. Then you'll have Strad Valley, is quite common, not in the north, but down, there's a few in the south of Kildare, I think, and is the street town, in other words, the village. And Levelly, you'd be a long time in working that one. The half townland, Lahuala. And then we have Galwally, which is on the Ormo Road, near the forest side shopping centre. Gal means foreign, so the foreigners' townland. Whoever the foreigners were, we're not sure. Anyway, let's go. Let's keep moving right and fast here. Doing the fort. That's the white one. Is where it's at the beginning. The white circle is the beginning, and the black one is a suffix, which means at the end or middle. Right. So you can see it's very evenly dispersed. It's not like Bally. It's pretty even all over Ireland, which is interesting too, isn't it? When you think of it, why? Anyway, Dunmurray's the town. Murray's fort, Downpatrick, and this is just coming in lovely with St Patrick's Day. I have a few examples of where you find other Patricks in places, but that's coming in the end. Patrick's fort, and then with Dungannon is Gannon's fort. Fort of Down. Doon is usually like D-U-N in English, but here it's Down, D-O-W-N, the port of the little fort. I presume it's a port on the Banyan, Port of Down. It must be a port. It's a port. And Dungiven is the fort of the hide or skin. They say that's to do with treating, the tanning hides, things like that. These are the sort of things that have gone on. You can imagine the fort was the little farm, and that would have been one of the activities. I'm sure when they made their leather, so I think that's why it's called that, Dungiven. And Duneen, little fort, is the top, and then we have Donegal, the fort of the foreigners. We had Gal there a minute ago when we talked about Galwally, the fort of the foreigners. Then Dunaree is, again, another song, if you ever go to Dunaree. Anyway, I'm probably dating myself by tired of these songs. In Cavan. It's interesting that there's a town called King's Court. King's Court, in the townland of Dunnery. Isn't that interesting? So they've translated the Irish when they named the town. But of course the townland was way, way back before the town was there. So anyway, Donach is an early church. We have Donach Moor and all those. Donach. I'll say more about those later. And then we have, of course, Dundonald. Anybody here knows what it means, don't you? You don't need me. Donald's Fort, right? Ra. It's interesting the way Ra is distributed, because you can see down, there's an awful lot of them down here, but not many in the north. And I told you the caveat before we started. So I'm convinced there are more than that in the north. I don't think he's done all his research, but it still gives you a good idea. Around Dublin, you have Rathfarnham, Rathmine. You can think of an awful lot of raths around Dublin. Yeah, all sorts of, and not so many, but more than showing, I would say, more than showing on the map. Doon's usually a more prestigious fort. Usually it was a quite important fort. Some of them with more than one ditch around them, one bank around them. Trivalate, what they call a trivalate rath would be one with 3 ditches, three rings. But Rath wouldn't be, but still pretty prestigious. These are the examples. Rathfriland is Freila's fort. Drumra, we have Ra at the end in Tyrone, the ridge of the fort. And then we have Rathcarbery, Carbery's fort in Armagh. And then we have Mahara. So you've got to look out for them at the end of where, you can say, oh, there's maybe your man that did this, maybe you missed a few. When you get Raths coming in at the end, not at the start, you maybe missed some. Anyway, Mahara, the plain of the fort, Rathkeevin in Fermanagh. Keeving, that's Keewan is the Irish for Kevin's fort. And Ardara, the height of the fort, I think you can still see that at Ardara. That fort is still there outside on a hill. And then we have Rathkenny, which is between Ballymena and going up towards the Glens direction, Rathkenny outside Ballymena. And then we have Rakira, the fort of the sheep. And that's, we'll go on to Liss. It's interesting that, the place where all the raths are, there's no Lisses at all. Around Dublin and all, around that, and Leinster basically, and, well, there are hardly any. And yet, look where the Lisses are. Prefix, suffix, middle. So that's an interesting distribution as well. Why? I think it must be dialect. I think they're both referring to the same thing, but one dialect used Ra to mean a fort, and another one used Liss. But Liss is generally regarded as the bog standard word for a fort. They're pretty basic farmsteads, That's what we can say about them, right? Interesting too. A lot of them in the north, but maybe not just showing up. Anyway, we'll move on. The examples. Lisburn, already talked about Lisburn. Listudor near Downpatrick, the fort of the leather tanner. I mentioned that again when we were talking about Dungiven, didn't I? Yeah. And then Lislap. Lava means a bed, but it's also used symbolically for a dolmen. And they were called the bed of Dermot and Grania because there's this great mythology that Dermot eloped with Grania. Dermot was a king, and I haven't time to tell you the story. But these megalithic tombs were sometimes referred to as the bed of Dermot and Grania, because that's what they eloped, so they had nowhere to sleep. So the way there's a capstone and supported by it. The imagination was that they slept on top of the capstone. So that's why they're called. And so that could be what the bed is. It's a very interesting name, isn't it? And the fort of the blindness, listen, Adele, I don't know why. You people probably could come up with better ideas than me. Anyway, here, those are all the lists. Oh, no, they're not. It's not. So, Lisnaskea at Derry, there's been a lot of dispute about. Some people said it was the Fort of the Sparrows, but apparently it's the surname, and McDullahan's fort. Then Lisnaskea. Some people thought that was a fairy thorn, Skach, a fairy thorn, but it's actually a shield. It's an inauguration site of the Maguires of Fermanagh, and it's called a shield because it was such an important defensive site. So it's the word shield is used symbolically there. And Lisboduff, Paul mentioned the word bow, a drum bow, the cow, the fort of the black cow, cows, the fort of the black cows, and then Lisnaskea and Monaghan. Gaeliach means a hag or a nun, which isn't very complimentary. It's not very complimentary. It comes from the word for a veil. Caille, C-A-I-L-L-E, means a veil in Irish. So that was why it was applied to both a hag who wore a veil and a nun who wears a veil. So I think that explains. It's not meant to be insulting. I don't think it's meant to be insulting at all. Anyway, we'll go on to church settlements. I don't want to talk too long here. The most common one is Kill, which is C-I-L-L in Irish, but very often it's K-I-L-L in English. And then we have Donach, I mentioned that earlier, an early church, Donach. And then we'll have Lan, L-A-N-N, the church. And then we have Chach, which means a house, and it has an oblique form. Like, in other words, it's an oblique form is one that's like it was used at the house, or on the house, So a special monastic house. Then Champel is a church, right? And Uglish is a church. So we'll look at the kills everywhere. Isn't it amazing? Isn't that just incredible? And it's even the number of places that begin with the word kill in Irish in Ireland. I haven't started to count them. It would take you to live alone. Anyway, there's the kills, right? And very even distribution. And examples, Kilrats in Antrim is the Church of the Rule, or Kirk and Reola is very interesting, because what was Kill, the Irish word Kill, has been Scoticized, let's say. In Ulster Scots, it's Kirk. The word Kirk in Ulster in Scots and Andals, it means a church. So there was such a big Scottish influence in Ballymena. That's the Ballymena parish, the Kirk and Reola. That's the parish of Ballymena. There were such a massive Scots settlement in Ballymena, and they took Kill. And they Scoticized it as Kirk. And then we have a person's name as a Cureala, which means the hound of the graveyard. So a saint, because he must have been very conspicuous in the graveyard. Anyway, and here's another good example of Kill and becoming Kirk. Isn't it lovely? You have a beautiful combination of Ulster Scots and Irish. Kirk Moyle at Ballymoney, Kirk Moyle, which was but they left us the old one when the Ordnance Survey settled on the forms of the place names around about 1830. The town land was given an alternative, two different names. So it was Kirkmoyle or Kilmoyle, explaining what Kirkmoyle means. So the bald church. Why bald? Because there was no steeple. Usually that was it. Or it could have been one that was a wee bit. Bald means like baldy, you see. But it means, in place name, bare. So it could mean maybe a dilapidated church, So Kilbrony is down there at Rostrevor, right? Baroness Church. Kirkcoven, and that's another Scottish influence. It's Kirk. They have made it into Kirk, and then Coven, but the Irish was Govan's church, and then Kildress is just the Church of Briars in Tyrone. Killeavy, the Church of the. I better get through these. The Church of the Mountain, Kilcronahan, the Church of St. Cronahan, Canally, the Church of St. Nalia. Then we have Kilmacrennan and Donegal. Originally Lough Neagh, the Church of the Sons of somebody called Aina, and then Killashandra, and Donach. There aren't many of those, and the tradition is they were all founded by St. Patrick. You take that with a pinch of salt. But what we do know is it's a very early word. I mean, it's very evenly distributed. It's common in parish names, and then, we have a few Donachmores. Like there's a Donachmore in Tyrone parish in Tyrone, and there's also Donachmore parish in County Down, and there's one in Donegal. So Donachmore of Tyrone, I've already said. There's one in Tyrone. It's already great early church. Donacloney, the early church of the Meadow, Cluan's a Meadow. And Drummond, only there you have it at the end of a word. The end of the name, the ridge of the early church. And there's that Drim word, which you get as drum. And then you have Bodoni, upper and lower in Tyrone. The hut, so obviously a hermit's hut or cell of the early church. And then we have Carndonna in Donegal. So the parish is called Donna. But the wee village is called Carndonna, and the ancient cross. I wonder if an ancient cross there. And in the village of Carndonna, Lambeg, of course, Lambeg is a little church. And the Navy is, you think it was Len, wouldn't you? But it's Lan, a church of the dwarf. And there's a lovely story, St. Patrick, and the dwarf was called Daniel. And it's an encounter with St. Patrick. And anyway, St. Patrick thinks a lot of him and puts him in charge of this church in the Navy. So the church of the dwarf, he was very small, this boy called Daniel. Right? And Mahara, Lan, you'd be a long time in guessing that was Lan, the plane of the church. And you get it in words in Irish, Lann at the end, the words Bia Lan, for example. Bia means food, and Lan, it just means the place of, a place where you would get, it's the same word actually, place of. Chach, a house, house. Chach is the ordinary one, but it usually means a monastic. And it's very even, isn't it? It's very all over Ireland. Tach Nevin in Armagh, Newin's monastic, and Tach Blaine in Down. Torella, T-I-G-H, is just a variant of Chach, right? That's what you call a dative form. And Rail's monastic. You remember we had Cúréala for Ballymena, Kilquan Raila. Well, this is Rail, on the same wavelength, like a graveyard. But somebody called Rail, right? And then we have Tadavnet in Monaghan. Davnet's monastic. Some people say that's Dimpna. Sometimes that name, Davnet, gets changed. It's a female saint anyway, Saint Davnet. And then Drummondtee in County Down, the ridge of the T at the end is the word for a monastic house. I think it's a monastic house. It doesn't have to be always a monastic house, but Seago's an interesting one. You'd never be a long time in guessing what the C was, but it's Chach. Sometimes an S comes in before a T in Irish place names. So you get Lacht, meaning a memorial stone, and then you get Slacht. Slach Neil, for example, Neil's memorial stone, memorial grave monument. So the same with Chach, sometimes an S comes in. So that's why we get the S for Seago. Chach Dagoa, St. Goban, that's another version of St. Goban. Tach Boyne, we're over the border in the west. Chach Boyhin. Boyhin was Columkill's successor as abbot of Iona. And it's quite common. in Ireland. And then Stack Allen, again, that's what I said about an S coming in before a T. You would think that was English, wouldn't you? Stack, but then you realise it's I think maybe more likely Stach, but this is the official Dublin place name version. So I went with their Collins monastic house, right? And here are the temples. Well, and again, Freddie, these came in in response to this lady here. Temple came in later. Kill goes back to earliest time, and so does Donagh. But Temple only comes in with the great monastic orders. You know, the Cistercian who came in from the continent. But it's quite common. When I say post-reform, I mean the Irish Church was reformed at that time. It was sort of brought more strictly into line with Rome around about the 1200s. Before that, it was more independent, you know. Anyway, and its structure. I'm not talking about dark. I'm talking about its structure. So this temple, meaning the church, came in at that time. Temple Patrick fits in nicely with St. Patrick's Day. And then we have Temple Finn, the White Church. And then we have Temple Cormac, which is Cormac's church. And Temple Corran is a parish which takes an island McKay. Well, it doesn't, I'm wrong. I'll take that back. It's just adjoining island McKay on the mainland. Before you go on down, you get Temple Corran. And then Temple, there's the Moyle, the Baldy thing again. Ball Church. That's quite common, that name, Temple Moyle. I think it's usually a church that has got into disrepair, you know, neglect. And then we have Ballan Temple at the end. We have 3 Ballan temples, the townland and Farran Temple, the land or district of the church, right? Eglish in Irish. It's really a Latin word. Ecclesia in French, it's Église. In Irish, it's Uglish. There's a parish called Uglish, called Eglish in Armagh, and there's a wee place called Eglish in Tyrone, which is also just it's straight. You know, you get it sitting on its own. You don't get any English moors, but I think that's because they were so big and conspicuous. They didn't need to be qualified. You know, the name didn't need to be qualified. Anyway, sorry. Just done in the south of Ireland, they anglicise it as Aglish. Well, in the north it's Eglish, so you have Ballyeglish and Derry. And then Lough Valley, we mentioned half town land before, Lough Valley. That's a lovely name, isn't it? Lough Valley Eglish, and Armagh, the half town. Shan Eglish, the old church, right? And Tatton Eglish. Tate is a land a bit like a town land, but it's only found in a few counties. It's not found in Antrim or down. It's found in Fermanagh. There's a few Tatties in Tyrone, Tatty Ray in Tyrone outside home. So, and then we have the Gord Alias Eglish, and that's in Tyrone. The field Alias. Gord is a field, but it can mean like church land as well. Okay. These are all natural landscape features, right? So Sleeve, a mountain, Drum, a ridge, Crock, meaning a hill, usually anglicized as Knock. Moy is a plain, the Moy. Mahara is a plain as well. And then Mullach, a hilltop. Tullach, a hillock. It's amazing how many parts of your body occur in Irish places to refer to features of I mentioned Drum already. Lurga, your shin, Aiden, your brow, but it means a hill brow. Cloch, a stone, you can think of plenty of clochs. And then Carrick, a rock, and Lag. Sleeve. All I want to point out about it's the capital of Sleeve is the Mournes. That's all I'll say. There are sleeves well scattered, but if you look at the Mourne Mountains, it's full of sleeve. It's amazing. There's hardly any in the Sperrins. There's 1 or 2 in Donegal, but it's incredible how many there are in the Mournes. The highest mountain in Ulster, Donard, Sleeve Donard. It's 850 metres. Comada, the Watching Mountain, 7, 6, 7. Then next is Banyan, the little peak. It must have a little peak somewhere, but it's quite a high mountain. Slieve Lamigan, the creeping mountain, because you have to, there's parts of it you have to crawl up it. It's 704. Barna is very conspicuous. The word for a gap in Irish is Barna, of course. So the gap mountain, you can see it for a long, long way. You can see the very conspicuous gap. And it's 730, 739. These two I couldn't get heights for. Crotleave, it's just to show you Slieve at the end of a mountain, at the end of a place name. Crotleave is Hump Mountain, and then we have Moolleave, the Ball Mountain. So I wasn't able to get heights for them, sorry. Then Shansley, the Old Mountain. Then Slemish, Mish's Mountain, it's a woman's name. She was supposed to be sister of the Ahu, from whom Lough Neagh is named. Anyway, Slieve Gallion, Derry, Callum's Mountain. Maybe, that's the way it's been interpreted, but maybe a word meaning height. Slieve Gallion in Armagh. It's been suggested it's Holly Mountain. I don't think Holly Mountain is, it's a word meaning a height, I think. And then we have Slieve Bay and Tyrone Bay. And the Irish is wonderfully rich in mythology. The legend is that this B-I-O-T-B was a son of Noah. He came to Ireland to escape the flood. It was one of the first. And it's, I mean, you don't take this as history, but it's still very interesting that these wonderful traditions were, you know, the mountain and Slieve, the mountain of snow in Inishowen, Slieve Snacht, right. Drum, that's a very interesting one, because you talk about the Drumlin Ridge in Ireland. Oh, this is the real heart of Drumlin country, and it's very well reflected. Drum, of course, we have some in Paul, we have some in Antrim, we have quite a few of them, but the big heartland is there in Monaghan. All the drums, right? Of course, County Down, there's a lot of drumlins too, but there aren't that many drums, are there? Right. So the ridge of the boundary, Drumcree, the boundary ridge, Drummondtee, and we'll have Drumquin, which isn't the surname Quin, it's the word Queen, which means pleasant ridge. And then we'll have Drumore, is common. We have the diocese of Drumore up here, and then we have the town of Drumore in Tyrone, Great Ridge in Drumbeg, Little Ridge. I thought we had Drumbow, but maybe, apologies if I... There's it up at the very top. The ridge of the cow, or cows. Drumskinny, the ridge of the knife. And Drumcern in County Derry. Cern means a stove, but I think in this case it's a kiln. It's symbolic use of stove. And we have Glass Drummond. We have Drummond with a drum with an N, with a diminutive. The green Little Ridge. And Ochram is a common enough one, which means horse ridge. Right? And Leitrim, you don't see that the D disappears there. Once you put another word in front, the D disappears. And the same with Leitrim, the D of so Grey Ridge. Crocker Hill, amazing density down here, and it's usually knock. So, but I think there are more here than the map shows. Knocklade Mountain at Ballycastle, the hill of the slope. So it can apply to just fairly big mountains, Croc, as well as just, smaller hills. And then when the Clochram outside Mahara, Cloch, Drumma, the Stone Ridge, in other words, there's Drum at the end, you see, and Knock, the hill at the beginning, Knock Manny, outside Clocher in Tyrone, Knock Nagoni, near Hollywood, Crocknagon, the Hill of the Rabbits, and then Knock Fulla, which is Bloody Foreland, if anybody's familiar with Donegal. 24, on the Hill of the Blood. There's a tradition that Balor of the Evil Eye was killed there, and the blood from his eye flowed there. Anyway, a plain, very even, and we can think of, I'm going to have to move a bit. Mayo in South Down is Mayo, a plain. Mayo in Tyrone is also the plain. Muff in Donegal is the same, it means plain. Mayo Gashel, the plain of the stone ring fort. Cashel is a stone ring fort. We didn't mention it, but we mentioned the three that are made of earth. And then we have Omagh, the virgin plain, maybe a plain that hadn't been cultivated at the time when the name was given, but that was a long, long time ago. The virgin plain. Muckamore, you would never guess that was the plain of the confluence. Commerce were two, where a river flows into the McCuskun, the plain of Coskin's plain. Movella, it annoys me sometimes that, there's a great saint, the great saint of called Finian of Movelle, but sometimes people they confuse Movella with Movelle in Donegal. Movella is the one that was St Finian's place. So they're always trying to steal St Finian from us, and because a lot of even reputable enough scholars they say it's the same name in Irish. It is the same in Movelle and Donegal is the same as Movella, and outside Newtownards, some people just don't seem to get it. That it's not St Finian has nothing to do with the Donegal Movelle. It's he's ours. He's from Newton Movella. So anyway, Mayo, plain of YouTube, and it's interesting. We have a place called Mayo Bridge outside Newry, and the townland outside Newry is Mayo, right? There's a townland Mayo, the same, but the bridge is Drogheda Mayo, and then we have Mugaberi, which is not far from Lough, or not far from Mahara, the plain of the rough land. Mahara, there's hardly any Maharis down here, but they're common. Look at Donegal, quite a lot. There's a lot of Maharis, and then very much northern Mahara. So Mahara felt this plain, Mahara, the plain of the fort. We mentioned that before. Mahara Gaul, the plain of the churches. Then with Mahara Mason, the plain of the word mast doesn't mean a mast on a ship. It means fruit, wild fruit of the forest and nuts. So that's what mason. It's also the ordinary word for fruit in Scottish Gaelic. It's mason. Mahara Mourne at Antrim. Mourne seems to be a tribal name in that case. Then we have Mahara Lynn. We've mentioned it before when we were talking about land. And then we have Mahara. There's an Antrim, one on the shore of Lough Neagh, north shore, and then there's one very near Dunlow in Donegal, just south of Dunlow. There's a lovely beach there at Mahara. And then we have Ballymahara and down the townland of the and what's the one in Tyrone? Lisnaskea, the plain of the plain. Yeah. And Mullach Hilltop. And these Mullachs, and we already saw the drum, but these ones that mean like a little hill or hilltop, you can see how common they are in that belt, that particular belt, but hardly any Mullachs in some parts of Ireland. Mullaban in South Armagh, the white hilltop. Mullach Moor in Sligo, the big one, the big hilltop, and then Mullach Glass. These are very straightforward. If all place names were as easy as this, we would know everything about them. They're not. Mullach, the green hilltop, that's not far from here. Mullach Glass. in County Antrim, going out towards Dunmurry direction. And then we have Shanmullagh, which is also, it's just outside Castle Dawson. Why would a hilltop be called old? You tell me. Because the landscape would all be the same age, wouldn't it? It's been suggested it was worked quite early. You know, it was in use quite early, let's say. So that's why it's called old. You know, like that might figure. You know, maybe you're not impressed with that, but you know, old, like there's Old Mountain. There's places called Old Mountain. Anyway, that's only in one theory. And Tullogh, again, you come back, keep coming back to the hill. Tullogh is the famous inaugural place of the O'Neills of Toome. They were based at the Green in Aghalurcher, which is outside. There's a wonderful fort just outside Derry called the Green in Aghalurcher. You can have a magnificent view of this whole sort of any show on and all the whole night. Outside Derry, Tullogh, yes. No, outside Cookstown, when they spread across from the Aghalurcher, and the Tullogh outside McKay there, the centre of power. The youths are worried. Tully Carnot, the hillock of the little Car. Tollymore, it's spelled with a no, is outside Newcastle. The big hillock. Tully Allen is a beautiful hillock. There are 4 places called Tully Allen. Then we have Tully Negrena, the hilltop of the hillock of the sun. Then we have Tullinespig. Aspig is the word for a bishop, so that's interesting. The hillock of the bishop, interesting. Then we have Tully Ballydonnell, the townland of the hillock of the townland of O'Donnell, and Mullagh Shantullagh. Mullagh Shantullagh. The summit of the old, there's the word old again, of the old hillock. Okay, I'm just going to quickly draw your attention to these websites, and you can look a lot of stuff up on these, you know.
Can I thank everybody for joining us today? It's wonderful that our numbers are small because we're still social distancing in the building, but it's wonderful to see and have an audience with a speaker. It's one thing through what we've had to do with Zooms and so forth to have a speaker talking to a blank wall, but it's great to have an audience. It's great that the museum is coming back to life and we're getting people in here, so thank you very much. Pat, thank you so much for your time. Thank you.